And what if the simple act of explaining who you are has been silently sabotaging your power, day after day, without you even realizing it? Consider this: you're not speaking to clarify, you're pleading to be understood. You're not defending the truth, you're asking for permission to exist. Each time you feel the need to explain your decisions, your emotions, your silence, or your past, you're giving away more than just words. You're relinquishing control. Because to justify is not to communicate, it is to beg. And begging is not a strategy, it is submission. You may not notice it at first. It feels normal to want to explain why you reacted the way you did, why you left, why you said that, why you made that decision. Perhaps you do it to find closure, to avoid being misunderstood, or because you can't bear the thought of someone constructing a false version of you. But in that compulsive urge to clarify, there is an invisible gesture the world interprets without you even knowing. You are admitting that you need to be understood. You are confessing, without saying it, that you still depend on the judgment of others. And there you are, justifying yourself for your silence, for speaking up, for walking away, for standing your ground. As though your very right to exist were conditional upon others' comprehension. As though you were guilty until proven innocent. Machiavelli wouldn't have cared to tell you this gently. He would have branded it into your consciousness. He who over-explains ceases to appear strong. Because in the theater of perception, weakness requires no evidence, it is sensed. And if power is, indeed, a matter of perception, and it is, then each justification is a fracture in your facade. Each explanation, a silent apology. Each attempt to clarify, a display of fear. But that's not how you see it. You do it because you're transparent, empathetic, because you wish to build honest relationships. You do it because you're tired of being misunderstood, because it wounds you when someone judges you without truly knowing you. You were taught that good people explain themselves, that those who do not are arrogant, cold, or insensitive. And yet, while you offer clean, honest words, others are building power atop your need to be understood. While you wear yourself thin explaining, they remain silent and observe. While you justify, they decide. Because in the game of power, victory doesn't go to the most articulate, but to the most inscrutable. Not to the most transparent, but to the most impenetrable. Have you not noticed that those who explain themselves the most are often those who respect themselves the least? That those who fear being misunderstood are also the easiest to manipulate? That those who justify every step end up walking on quicksand? The need to explain is a sophisticated form of emotional dependence. It is the echo of an unhealed wound. It is the hope that the other will see you differently, if only you provide enough context. But the other is not interested in your context. The other has already decided. The verdict has been issued. And every word you add is fuel to that fire. Ask yourself in silence, how many times have you felt worse after explaining something that already hurt? How many times did your honesty change nothing, but left you more exposed? How many times have you wished you had said nothing at all? That is what Machiavelli would have understood immediately. He didn't write for idealists. He wrote for those who understood that perception is everything. That the world does not reward your sincerity, it exploits your need to be understood. And while you balance your emotions with your reasons, others have already chosen to weaponize your words. Because he who defends himself has already admitted that there is something to defend. And he who explains himself has already accepted that silence is insufficient. You could choose to say nothing. You could decide that your life requires no footnotes. You could stop replying to messages demanding an official version. You could step out of the emotional tribunal in which you've been placed without your consent. You could walk away without looking back, without explaining why you will not return. But you don't, because you're still afraid of being perceived as cruel. You still fear being seen as cold, distant, insensitive. You still carry the inherited guilt of having chosen your peace over someone else's comfort. And that is the real prison. Not the misunderstanding itself, but your reaction to it. Not what they say about you, but your need to correct it. Machiavelli would tell you that power is not negotiated, it is exercised. That those who hold authority do not justify, they act. That respect is not requested, it is imposed. And that silence, when held with conviction, can speak louder than any declaration. Because silence that does not tremble unsettles. Silence that does not explain intimidates. And he who intimidates, leads. Perhaps you've been living in clarification mode all this time, trying to explain your limits, your wounds, your choices, your growth. And perhaps it's time to understand that you never need to do that again. That you don't have to sanitize every word you spoke or disinfect every emotion you felt. That there is more power in unapologetic silence than in 1,000 carefully rehearsed speeches. Because justifying yourself is an attempt to win with arguments a war that is fought with presence. And you were not made to convince, you were made to stand your ground without asking for permission. So the real question is, how much longer will you continue explaining yourself to those who already chose not to understand you? How much more of your energy will you invest in proving that you are good, right, clear, or coherent? The day you stop justifying yourself will be the day you reclaim full authorship of your own story. Not because others will finally understand you better, but because, at last, you will no longer care. And that, though no one may applaud it, will be your true act of power. Continuing to justify yourself is a slow and silent form of erasure. You don't cease to exist all at once, no. It's more insidious than that. It's as though each explanation you offer strips away a small piece of your presence. A voice that grows weaker the more it tries to clarify. An authority that dissolves with every attempt to sound acceptable. There is something profoundly destructive in the compulsion to explain everything, as if another's misunderstanding could somehow invalidate your truth. As if being misinterpreted made you illegitimate. And yet, it's a trap. The more you justify yourself, the more conditional your relationships become. You are no longer truly being yourself. You become a curated version of who you are, measured, edited, softened, so that others don't feel discomfort, don't walk away, don't criticize. But what you sacrifice in trying to please is precisely what sustains you, your center, your power, your coherence. You cannot walk through life as if you owe every person a speech about why you made a choice they don't understand. You cannot give away your inner peace every time someone raises an eyebrow or asks a question disguised as concern. Why did you leave? Why did you change? Why are you like this now? Why didn't you respond? Why did you walk away? Why didn't you offer your side of the story again? There is a silent, cruel expectation at work that you must account for not having tolerated the intolerable, that you owe an explanation for reclaiming your voice, that you must justify the distance you needed in order to protect your peace. But the truth is far simpler. You walked away because you were betraying yourself. You changed because you were being broken. You went quiet because you were tired of begging to be understood. And you stopped explaining because you had nothing left to prove. So what if they don't understand? So what if they distort your silence, invent reasons, project intentions you never had? So what if they think you lost control, when in fact, it was the first time you acted from a place of deep inner clarity? You cannot live your life trying to correct the versions of you others have created in their minds. Every time you attempt to do so, you step back into their game, onto their board, giving them a power they were never meant to possess. What unsettles people about your silence isn't the absence of explanation. It's the implicit message: you no longer need validation. You are not waiting to be understood. You are not trying to repair your image. You have chosen not to persuade, but to live. And that terrifies those who build connections through emotional manipulation. Because when you stop justifying yourself, you interrupt the cycle. No more drama. No more debate. Just a decision made quietly and without apology. And that alone is a kind of power many cannot tolerate. But to reach that place, you must pass through something. You must endure the noise that comes with silence. The malicious interpretations. The superficial judgments. The loneliness of not being understood. The echo of your own voice whispering, maybe you should explain it better. But no, you shouldn't. Because at this point, what's at stake is not your image, it's your freedom. And no one who is truly free needs permission to move. Machiavelli understood this at a depth most dare not explore. Power is not negotiated through polite words. Respect is not earned by soft explanations. Authority is not born from being understood, it is born from being unwavering. from holding your silence even when it hurts, from continuing your path even when the world demands you pause and explain why you walked away. To him, every justification was a forfeiture of altitude, a gesture of stooping toward the level of those who challenge you. And one who stoops too often eventually crawls. Of course, you could go on justifying yourself. You could write long messages detailing your point of view. You could ask to be heard, to be given the benefit of the doubt. You could try to prove that your reasons were valid, that it wasn't selfishness but self-preservation, not coldness but clarity. And perhaps you would do it well. Perhaps you would even convince a few. But in doing so, what would you be reinforcing? That you need their approval to feel at peace. That your truth depends on being believed. That your identity requires external validation to remain intact. That is not freedom. It is dependency wearing the mask of honesty. True freedom does not argue with distortion. It walks away. It does not react to provocation. It observes. It does not enter debates to defend itself. It decides. It does not seek to be understood. It becomes presence. And that presence, over time, becomes law. Not everyone will know why you did what you did, but they will understand, whether or not they like it, that you no longer owe anyone an explanation. There comes a moment, and perhaps you are close, when you are no longer willing to live a life that constantly provides context. When you realize that those demanding explanations are not seeking to understand you, they are seeking to control you emotionally. They want to see you hesitate, to watch you waver, to make you second-guess your own clarity. And in that hesitation, they gain ground. But when you remain firm in your silence, when you no longer yield to the pressure to explain, something extraordinary happens. You become untouchable. Not because you are arrogant, but because you have stopped negotiating your truth. That kind of presence unsettles people. Not because it is harsh, but because it is free. And freedom that does not explain itself is the purest form of authority. Do not be mistaken. This is not about shutting down or becoming hardened or refusing to speak ever again. It is about no longer justifying what comes from your own lucidity. About guarding your decisions as one guards sacred ground. Because that is what they are, sacred. They are not up for vote. They are not subject to trial. They are not offered up for approval. They are made. They are lived. And they are sustained in silence. And that silence is not emptiness. It is your power speaking in another language. One that does not aim to convince, only to endure. So let them think what they will. Let them tell their stories. Let them whisper, accuse, doubt. Let them search for answers that will never come. You are not here to provide edited versions of your soul. You are here to inhabit it unapologetically. And sometimes, the most loyal thing you can do for yourself is to say nothing. Because the ones who understand your silence already see you. And those who don't, never will, no matter how many reasons you give. That is the difference. And that, whether you say it or not, is your most silently powerful act. So now that you know, will you continue justifying yourself? Because this is not about pride. It's about dignity. It's about refusing to waste your energy on hollow conversations where the other party has already chosen not to understand you. It's about closing the doors of your inner sanctuary to those who only enter to question how you pray. You're not becoming cold. You're becoming sacred. You've begun to guard your space the way one protects fertile land. Not everyone deserves to walk upon it. Not everyone is worthy of planting there. And certainly, not everyone has the right to demand an explanation for why you bloom or why you withdraw. You were taught that explaining is a form of empathy. That providing context is a mark of maturity. That justifying yourself sustains relationships. But no one warned you of the cost. No one spoke of the exhaustion that comes from having to articulate every fiber of your soul. No one cautioned you about the slow, invisible erosion that occurs when you live constantly concerned with how each step you take, each silence you maintain, and each boundary you assert will be perceived. And so you lived like this, with your soul laid out on the table, hoping someone might read it with care. But instead of understanding, you met judgment. Instead of listening, you met demands. Instead of connection, you encountered manipulation. And every time you tried to explain yourself, you believed you were mending bonds, when in reality, You were digging your own emotional grave. Because the more you explain, the more you give. And the more you give, the further you drift from your center. There is an uncomfortable truth you must accept. Your silence may hurt. Not because it is cruel, but because it is clear. Not because it is violent, but because it disarms. Silence born from certainty is not punishment. It is a boundary. It is the invisible line where negotiation ends and self-respect begins. And those who are offended by your lack of explanation are not seeking truth. They are seeking control. Clarity requires no audience. Integrity does not ask for permission. Peace is not up for negotiation. There is a depth within you that was never meant to be displayed like an exhibit. You were not born to live under constant judgment, nor to satisfy emotional demands disguised as concern. You were meant to inhabit your truth, to live it without fear, to make decisions without dressing your pain in sweetened speeches or softening your limits to make others more comfortable. They may call you selfish. They may say you've closed off, that you're not the same, that you've become distant, that you no longer try. And perhaps they're right. You no longer try to be understood because you finally understand yourself. And that understanding no longer requires their approval. It does not depend on validation. It does not seek applause. It demands only one thing, that you never betray yourself again. When you stop justifying yourself, you will lose some things. I won't deny it. Some people will walk away. Some relationships will dissolve. Some doors will close. But do not be afraid. Those doors only opened when you made yourself small. Those relationships were sustained by your emotional surrender. They were built on your fear of discomfort. And when you stop justifying them, they will disappear. The pain will be real, but so will the liberation. Because what remains after your silence, what does not run from your firmness, what respects you without requiring explanations, is what is true. The rest was noise. The rest was dependency. The rest was emotional transaction. You may still hear that inner voice whispering, "Explain yourself, so they'll understand." That voice is not wisdom. It is fear. Fear of being unloved, fear of loss, fear of being perceived as unkind. But you are not unkind for remaining silent. You are not cruel for refusing to justify. You are not indifferent for choosing peace. You are simply someone who has finally decided to treat yourself with the same reverence you once offered others. And yes, you will still feel tempted. You'll still write long letters in your mind, rehearsing what you would say if you had to explain. But you won't. Not because you don't know how, but because you no longer need to. You will realize that silence has a structure more enduring than any argument. That the absence of justification becomes, in time, a form of presence. One that does not shout, yet commands attention. One that does not persuade, yet remains. The world will not celebrate you for this. The world favors those who explain, those who yield, those who open the door once more. But you are not here to be a favorite in the court of public judgment. You are here to build your emotional territory without vulnerable borders. To look others in the eye without feeling the need to narrate your scars. To say no without attaching a because. To walk away without crafting a farewell that cushions the discomfort of others. You do not need to explain your healing. You do not need to justify your growth. You do not need to convince anyone of why you now protect what you once gave away freely. You have reached a point where your silence is not absence. It is definition. And when that happens, something in you changes forever. Those who understand this without needing an explanation are the ones who deserve to remain. Those who demand reasons, out of ego, out of need, out of control, will eventually distance themselves. And that is perfectly fine. Because what awaits on the other side of justification is not loneliness, but sovereignty. Not isolation, but inner power. Not coldness, but emotional clarity. Living without justifying yourself does not mean you are indifferent. It means you are no longer willing to betray yourself for anyone. It means you trust your clarity so deeply that you no longer need to wrap it in softened words. It means you have chosen to be a grounded presence, not a compliant echo. When someone says to you, "I don't understand why you did that," smile. You don't have to respond. You don't have to explain. You are not obligated to offer them a map of a territory they never intended to explore with respect. Because you know why you did it. Because you were there, feeling, deciding, standing tall when no one else stood with you. Because you walked through your own ruins before choosing to rebuild without spectators. And because you understand that anyone who needs you to explain your peace was likely part of your war. So remain silent. Not out of indifference, but out of dignity. Not because you lack words, but because you finally understand that peace is not defended. It is lived. And living it, without asking permission, is your highest form of self-respect. Your boldest act. Your quietest triumph.